The first question I have for you is, what are you chasing? What are you chasing? What is it that you're pursuing in life? What is it that you're looking to accomplish? What are you chasing? The second thing that I have to ask you is, what is it that you're holding on to? And I'm going to challenge you and I'm going to ask you that question because some of us have been holding on to things just a tad bit too long. And some of us, it might in fact be that time for you to start letting some things go. And finally, the last question I have for you is, what are you attracting? Based on how you're showing up right now in your life, what are you attracting into your life? What are the opportunities that you're attracting into your life? What are the relationships you're attracting to your life? And what are you attracting as a result of who you are right now? And so let's go back to the very first question. If you're a note taker, go ahead and write this down. And so the first thing I'm asking you is, what are you chasing? And so if we think about it, most of us are really chasing different things. You know, some of us, if I ask you right now, what are you chasing? You say, Andy, I'm chasing that money, man. I'm trying to make some money. I'm trying to increase my income. I'm trying to get a promotion. I'm trying to take my business to the next level. You happen to be chasing money right now. Some of you, if I were to ask you, well, what are you chasing? And you say, well, Andy, you listen, I am chasing love. I'm out here. I've got online profiles. I'm around here, out here dating, and I'm sick and tired of being alone. And I am chasing love. I'm looking for companionship. I'm looking for someone I can call my own. I'm looking for a husband. I'm looking for a wife. You know, maybe you need to talk to my wife, Coach Cash. She is a love coach. Maybe you're chasing love right now. Or, you know, some of us are chasing significance. Some of us are chasing fame. You know, some of us are chasing stability. But, you know, most of us have something that we're chasing. Some of us are even chasing our goals and our dreams. And so I want you to think about right now, what is it that you're chasing in your life? What is it that you're pursuing? And so here's what I've come to realize, that many of us go through life chasing things that we don't really truly want. In other words, we think that's what we want. And many people had to learn this lesson, right? People who thought that they wanted to be famous became famous and realized that in many ways it absolutely destroyed their lives. Or people who are chasing money, thinking that money was going to bring them happiness. And even though money does create a lot of opportunities for you, and money can make life a whole lot easier, but I've come to realize that, you know what, when you begin to make a little more money and so forth, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be happy. You have to make a choice to be happy. You have some people that have minimal resources that are extremely happy, and there are people who are loaded, filthy rich. And guess what? They've got all the money in the world and they're still miserable. And so what I found is that many of us will oftentimes chase something and believe that the thing that we're chasing is going to bring us happiness and fulfillment, only to realize that it's not quite what we thought it would be. And I can speak from experience, because I remember when I first left corporate America. As a matter of fact, before I even left corporate America, when I was first leaving college and I got my undergraduate degree in accounting, my master's degree in corporate accounting, and I remember one of the reasons why I decided to major in accounting was because I had a conversation with one of my accounting teachers who said, hey, Andy, I don't know what it is that you're majoring on. I just went through the exams. I went through the tests, and I noticed you did pretty darn well on this test. And she said, I don't know if you've ever considered it, but you should probably go ahead and major in accounting. You know, accountants make pretty good money. And not only that, but you will have a pretty solid and stable career. And so the two things that I heard in that conversation was that I was going to make good money and that I was going to have stability. And so at that moment, I made a decision. And the way you can know I made the decision, because the rest of my actions followed that path, I made the decision early on that I was going to chase the money and that I was going to chase the stability. And so that's why I chose to make accounting the track. That's why I got my master's in corporate accounting. That's why I would go on and eventually get my CPA license, and then also land a job with one of the largest professional service firms in the world, PricewaterhouseCoopers. But let me tell you something that I didn't realize. I didn't realize that in the process of chasing money and in the process of chasing stability, that what I was doing was that I was leaving behind and I was making a trade-off with what my purpose was. I was making a trade-off with what my calling is. And so here's what I need you to realize. Many of us right now that we're going through the process and we're chasing something, but we haven't taken the time to consider what we're trading off. And so there are many people out there who are just chasing the money and chasing the careers, and the trade-off for them is maybe it's at the expense of maybe their family. And so even though they're quote unquote saying I'm working hard for my family, to be able to provide for them. But unfortunately, they're never there spending time with their wife. They're never there spending time with their husband. They're never there spending time with their children because they're so busy chasing the money. Or maybe perhaps if maybe you're the person who's been saying, Andy, listen, man, I've been chasing this stability, and you don't realize that in the process of you chasing the stability, that you have made a trade-off and you have forfeited actually going after and fulfilling whatever your calling is on your life or whatever your purpose is. And so what I realized is that when I started working in corporate America, and I told you, and I've shared this with you before, after about 3.5 years of working there, I was having this internal turmoil, and that the internal conversation was that, Andy, there's got to be more than this. And so because I was so fixated on the stability, I was so fixated on the career, I was so fixated on getting, a well-paid corporate career, that I didn't realize that I was making a trade-off. And the trade-off was that I never took the time to really consider for a moment what was going to be my purpose, or what is my purpose, or that I was going to step into my purpose. And so I want you to think about right now, as you look at your life, I want you to think about what is it that you're currently chasing right now. And whatever it is that you're chasing, I want you to think about for a moment, is it possible that right now you're making a trade-off? And not only that, but is the thing that you're chasing truly what you want? And I won't forget this. I had a good friend of mine from college. We both were accounting majors. We both went through the master's program together. We both sat for the CPA exam. And I remember the very first time I went to his house to study, it was the craziest thing. I went into one of his back rooms and he said, Andy, let me show you my collection. And he opened up this closet and it was so intimidating. He had the most crazy collection of guns. I mean, all kind of guns, Glocks and handguns and shotguns and all kind of stuff. I was like, whoa, man. I was like, what's your fascination with guns? And he said, man, for forever, I just would watch all these television shows, man. And I've always wanted to actually become an FBI agent, man. And he says, I love the movies and how they glamorize the FBI agents. And he said, man, believe it or not, he said, I'm getting a degree in accounting because of the fact that I want to become an FBI agent. I said, really? I said, who gets a degree in accounting because they want to become an FBI agent? He said, Andy, believe it or not, he said, accounting majors are one of the at that time, he said, they're one of the most highly recruited actual diplomas for people who are actually going and pursuing to become FBI agents, because they love accountants, because accountants have the ability, they're critical thinkers, they go in deep, they're analytical and so forth. And I said, wow, I had no idea. And then so this guy went through undergrad, got his accounting degree, got his master's degree in corporate accounting, he passed the CPA exam. And then I went on to work for PricewaterhouseCoopers, and then he went on this journey getting an accounting job, but ultimately his only goal was to become an FBI agent. And so I remember we finally got on the phone, we were talking, he said, Andy, man, he said, this process is crazy, man. They've been doing all kind of background checks on me. They've been doing all kind of testing. I mean, they're going all the way back to my elementary school records. Man, he's like, man, this is a serious process. He said, not only that, but he says, I don't know if you remember, but in college, remember I wore glasses? He said, well, guess what? I couldn't even be able to get hired by the FBI because of my vision. So he said, I even paid thousands of dollars to get LASIK surgery to get my eyes corrected so I could become an FBI agent. I said, man, listen, man, well, good luck, man. I really hope that things work out for you. And so it was about maybe 7 months went by, and I followed up with him. I called him up. I was like, hey, man, what's going on? He said, oh, man, listen, man, you won't believe this, man. I got approved, man. I finally got approved. I am officially going into FBI training. I'm about to become an FBI agent. I was like, dude, that's insane, man. I remember when we were in college. I remember how bad you wanted this thing. I know that this is a son that you've been chasing for a very, very long time, man. I'm so happy for you, man. Congratulations. And then lo and behold, it's 1 year later, and I finally catch up with my buddy. I'm like, hey, man, how you doing, man? Tell me the life of being an FBI agent, man. What's it been like? And he said, Andy, I said, what? He said, so you're not going to believe this. I said, what? He said, listen, man, I went through the training and I became an FBI agent, man. And right away, they were going to ask me to go on a special assignment that was going to require me to leave the country. And he said that it's not what I thought it was going to be. He said, my idea of an FBI agent was all the things that I saw on television. And this was something I had been chasing for so long. And I realized that it's not what I want, man. And he said, believe it or not, 2 months ago, I gave my letter of resignation, man. I was blown away. I couldn't believe it because I'm thinking to myself, my goodness, I mean, this is the only thing this guy talked about all through college when we were getting our accounting degree, when we were getting our master's degree, when we were studying together for the CPA exam, after college when I was following up with him, all he was talking about was becoming an FBI agent. And now this guy finally becomes an FBI agent and he realizes that it's not what he wants. And here's what I need you to understand, that there are many people, unfortunately, who followed that same path. You see, they've gone all their lives chasing something, whatever that thing may be. Maybe they were chasing the fame, they were chasing the acknowledgement, they were chasing the money, they were chasing the position, they were chasing the prestige, they were chasing an individual, they were chasing. And they never put any real thought into, do I really want this thing that I'm chasing? And because they didn't put any real thought into it, they finally got it. They finally got to that point, and now they say, wait a second, it's not what I thought it was going to be. This is not what I thought it was going to be. This is not bringing me the level of happiness that I want. And so I want to save you some time. I want to save you some frustration. And I want you to start asking yourself the hard questions, the questions that most people don't take the time to think about. And I want you to spend some time. You see, successful people take the time and they actually schedule time to think. Most people don't take the time to think. They don't schedule time to think. And I'm telling you, you have to schedule time to think. And you have to ask yourself some difficult questions. And you have to ask yourself some challenging questions. And one of those is, what am I currently chasing right now? And is the thing that I'm chasing really going to bring me the level of fulfillment, the level of happiness that I think it is? I think that if my friend really would have took some time early on to get a real true understanding of what it was that he was chasing, he would have saved himself a lot of time, a lot of frustration, a lot of grief. So I want you to write that question down. And this something I want you to ponder on is, what are you chasing? And is that thing that you're chasing really going to bring you any level of fulfillment? Then the second thing that I want you to think about is, what are you holding on to? What are you holding on to? And the reason why I tell you to think about that is, oftentimes when we think about holding on to something, or when we even are at that place where we're saying, maybe this is something I should let go of, we often associate letting go with a sign of weakness. But here's what I've come to realize in life, that oftentimes it takes more strength to let go than it does to hold on. And so many of us, unfortunately, are holding on to things beyond their expiration date. Many of us are holding on to things beyond their shelf life. One of the things that my wife and I would do every once in a while is we'll go into the cabinet and we'll start pulling out all the things that we have in our cabinet. And then we'll start deciding what is it that we're going to keep and what is it that we should actually throw away. And so what we'll discover is we'll buy something and we shove it in the back of the cabinet, or we never actually get in there and use it. And then we pull it out and then we look at the date and we realize that it's past its shelf life. In other words, it's expired. And so it's no longer any good. And so we got to throw it away. And so what most of us don't realize is we hold on to a lot of things beyond their shelf life. And so I'll give you a perfect example. Some of you right now still have some friendships that you have outgrown. I mean, there's somebody, you've known them. Yeah, you've known them since high school. I mean, you've known this person for a very long time. However, because of the fact that you've been growing, you've been doing some personal development, you've been listening to motivational message, you've been reading books, you have higher goals, and you're pursuing a business. You're looking to take your dreams to the next level. You're looking to go from working a regular corporate job to fulfilling your goals, your dreams, your destiny. You now have a family. You now, the things that you used to do, running the streets and clubbing and having a good time, you sort of outgrown those things. And so the relationship that you had with that person was around things that you've outgrown. And so in many ways, you've outgrown the relationship. The relationship has reached a shelf life and the shelf life has expired, but you're still holding on. And the reason why you're holding on is because you're saying to yourself, well, this person has been my friend for so long. They've been my friend now for 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. Well, guess what? That it may be time to let go, because of the fact that, understand this, that new levels also means new friends. When you're trying to get to the next level, it also means that you're gonna have to start changing people, places, and things. So people are one of the things that you absolutely have to change. You got to start changing your associations. Dennis Kimbrough said, if you're the smartest one in your group, you need a new group. And so you've got to start surrounding yourself with the right people. There's been studies that have shown that you will make within a few $1,000s of your 5 closest friends. And I remember one particular telephone company used to have a whole ad around your Fab 5. And so these were the 5 people that you spoke to the most. And so who's your Fab 5? Who are the people that you're talking to the most? And there's a strong possibility that there's somebody in there that maybe you have to let go of, or maybe there's something you've been holding on to, like a grudge or some bitterness. They say that when you hold a grudge against somebody, it's almost as if that you are taking poison and you're hoping and wishing that something is going to happen to the other person. And so at some point, you've got to come to the place where you got to say, wait a second, I need to let go. There's an old African proverb. And it says that you got to let go or be dragged. And so many of us are holding on to things that are detrimental, things that can no longer serve us, things that are dragging us in another direction of our goals and our dreams. This is a story that I shared with some of you years ago. I don't know if you remember this, and some of you who are new, you probably never heard me share this. I want to share this with you. I used to have this German Shepherd. Her name is Jasmine. I mean, this dog was high energy, most athletic, amazing dog ever, German Shepherd. And I'm not just saying that because that was my dog and I absolutely adored her, but this dog was absolutely amazing. And so I remember one particular time I had to head out to the West Coast, and I was going to be out of town for a couple of days. And so I asked one of my friends if she would do me a favor and just swing by, check on Jasmine, make sure she has water and food, and periodically go ahead and take Jasmine out for a walk every single day. And so, I left, and, when you have a dog and you really love the dog, it's like almost having kids. So I called back the first day. I'm like, hey, what's going on? Everything cool? Did you check on Jasmine? She said, yeah, no problem. I gave Jasmine her food, got her water. I took her for a walk. Everything's cool. The following day, I give her a call, and I'm calling in to check on. I'm like, hey, what's going on? And all of a sudden, I could tell something's wrong. And I'm like, is everything okay? She's like, no. I said, what happened? Did something happen to Jasmine or anything? She was like, no. She says, actually, I'm just now leaving the hospital. I said, what do you mean leaving the hospital? Did Jasmine bite you? Or, what happened? She said, no. She said, I went over there to open the door, check on Jasmine. I got her some water, I got her some food, and I put her on the leash, and we went outside to go for a walk like we did the previous day. We started to go for a walk. And then all of a sudden, Jasmine saw this squirrel, and she just stopped dead in her tracks. And all of a sudden, she put that hind leg up, and her tail went like straight out, and you could tell she was just focused in on the squirrel. And my friend said she tried to pull the collar to get Jasmine's attention, but Jasmine was not paying any attention to her. And she said all of a sudden, Jasmine began to lunge at the squirrel in the direction that the squirrel was. She said she was holding on, and then Jasmine, being such a big dog and such a strong dog, Jasmine really got aggressive and started going after the squirrel. And eventually, Jasmine pulled her to the ground. She said she's holding on to the leash, and so Jasmine actually drags her. She twists her ankle, and as she's holding on to the leash, she's being dragged against the concrete floor, and all the skin is being literally like rubbed off of her arm and her legs and everything. And I was like, oh my goodness. I said, well, first of all, are you okay? She said, listen, they said it's a bad sprain with my ankle. I'm definitely scabbed up, but it's going to be okay. And I said, my goodness, I'm so sorry. I can't believe that. And once I realized that she was okay and Jasmine was okay, I just asked her the question. I said, I just got to ask you this question. And I said, well, when Jasmine started lunging for the squirrel, or at least at the point where you fell down, why didn't you just let go of the leash? And when I asked her that question, you would think I asked her the most profound question. And she just paused for a moment and she said to me, Andy, I don't know. And so here's what I realized, that many of us are holding on to things that are literally dragging us and are literally in our detriment. I mean, in other words, literally, we don't realize, just like my friend, that we've got to let go or be dragged. Now, I don't know what's at the end of your leash. I don't know what it is that you're holding on to. Maybe you're holding on to some negative, toxic people that are around you. Maybe you're holding on to a past grudge. Maybe you're holding on to a past failure. I don't know what's at the end of your leash, but all I know is at some point you have to be willing to let go or be dragged. And so I want you to be thinking about right now in your life, what are you holding on to that is possibly to your detriment? What is it that you're holding on to that is no longer serving you? What is it that you're holding on to that's dragging you in the opposite direction of your goals and your dreams? I want you to think about that for a moment, because I'm telling you this, that there are certain things that it's time for you to let go. And whether that is a past disappointment, a failure, maybe it's the same old story, the same tired story you keep replaying about why you are not going back into business, as to why you're not going to try again, as to why you gave up on your goals and your dreams. You've been playing the same old story, the same old excuses for too long. Listen, it's time to get over the story. It's time to move on. It's time to let go. And you can't write the next chapter in your book if you keep rereading the previous book. I know this. Listen, as many of you know, I'm so grateful and thankful that I have just recently released a book, Show Up for Your Life, 7 Principles to Living an Extraordinary Life. And here's what I'll tell you right now. If you haven't ordered your copy of the book, I want you to do that right now. Make sure you go to showupforyourlifebook.com. Once again, that is showupforyourlifebook.com, and you can order your copy right away. But I can tell you right now, I wouldn't be able to get through the book. I wouldn't be able to write all the chapters of the book if all I kept doing was rereading the previous chapter. And many of us live our lives like that. You see, we want to get to the next chapter of our lives, but we keep rereading the previous chapter of the bad breakup, the previous chapter of the bad investment, the previous chapter of something that happened, the previous chapter of a failure, a setback, or something that didn't go our way. Well, listen, get over it. It happened. It's unfortunate, but now is the time for you to begin to move forward. Now is the time to start writing a new chapter. And so finally, here's the last thing. Here's the last question that I have for you. The last question I have for you is, what are you attracting into your life? What are you attracting into your life? Jim Rohn, who is perhaps one of the best speakers of our time, best thought leaders of our time, he said something profound and powerful. And I have to be honest with you, the first time I hear it, I don't know if I really got it, but now I completely get it. And he said that success is not something that you pursue. He said success is something that you attract by becoming an attractive person. And he doesn't mean attractive person like physically attractive. What he's saying is it's based off of who you become as a person. In other words, you will attract people into your life based off of the type of person that you become. You will attract certain opportunities into your life based off of how you show up on a daily basis. You will attract people who are operating at certain levels if you yourself are operating at a certain level. You will also attract negative people, toxic people, if you yourself are negative. So realize this, that oftentimes we attract what we are. And so if you want to attract love into your life, if you want to attract people who are really generous, then you need to be a loving and a generous person. If you want to attract successful people in your life, then you need to perform at a level of excellence. You need to create things and operate at a level of excellence. You need to master your craft. You need to be a person that is seriously serious about the things that you're pursuing. And understand this is both positive and negative. And so realize you can attract everything that you want in your life, and you can also attract everything that you don't want in your life. Oftentimes, it is the way that you choose to show up. It is who you are that oftentimes is going to determine what is drawn and what's attracted to you. I'm telling you, there's some people, when they open up their mouth and all they keep telling you is all the negative things that are going on, all the toxic things. And yes, absolutely, all they're ever going to see is negative and toxic things, because guess what? That's what they're looking for. That's where their mindset is. So of course, the sky is falling. Of course, the government is messed up. Of course, their job is horrible. Of course, everybody's always trying to get over on them. Of course, somebody did something bad. Somebody cut them out. Somebody took their money. Somebody's trying to do this. Somebody's doing that. Of course, because guess what? That's their state of mind. That's what they're expecting. And whatever it is that you're expecting in life, that's what you'll get. And so oftentimes we have to become the very thing that we're looking to attract. And so I've come to realize that when I look at my life and I look at certain opportunities, I'm thinking about, somebody reached out to me about a major conference that they asked me to be the keynote speaker at a major conference later on in this year. And I could tell you, I remember attending that very conference 3 years ago and sitting down in the audience and looking around at all 700 people in the room and saying, wow, this is a first-class event. I would love to be able to speak on this stage. I would love to be able to speak at this event. And that was just something I said to myself. And I could tell you this, that it wasn't because that I went up to the person and said, hey, is there any way that you can book me 3 years from now so I could be the speaker? No, that's not what I did. I continued to work on my craft. I continued to develop my voice. I continued to seek opportunities. And let me just tell you how I got this opportunity. Fast forward 2.5 years later, I have one particular coaching client who is out there kicking butt and taking names. And she is a coach, and she happens to have a inner circle coaching program. And people who are in her inner circle coaching program had to pay and make an investment in excess of $25,000. And this is a young lady that I happen to coach and help her out with her story. And she said, Andy, I have a weekend retreat going on with my inner circle coaching students. And I was telling them about how you helped me with my story. And I want to know, can you just swing by and share a couple words about the importance of story and talk to them about what you were able to do with me? And I think, hey, if you swing by, Andy, you may be able to pick up a couple of clients. And so I said, absolutely, I'd love to do that. And so I swung by her meeting and I spoke to them about the importance of story. I told them about, how they can use story in order to have better connections with their coaching clients, to be able to better connect and influence the people who are sitting in their audience so that they can increase their closing ratio. And that stories fundamentally allows to create a shift to make impact with people. And so I'm talking about all these things. And coincidentally, the person that is sitting in the front row happens to be the president of the Office Depot Foundation. Now, the Office Depot Foundation happens to be the organization that puts on this tremendous, extraordinary event. And so she's sitting in the front row. She hears me share the story. We have a follow-up phone call. She then becomes my student. I then end up coaching the president of the Office Depot Foundation, helping her to leverage her story as she shares and talks about the amazing things that they're doing at the Office Depot Foundation to make impact and change lives. And then she says to me, hey, Andy, you know what? We're doing an event this year. And I said, well, actually, I'm familiar with the event. I attended the event 3 years ago. And she said, I was, thinking about who should be the keynote speaker this year. And I said, you know what? I can't think of a better person than for you to come in and speak to all these people about the importance of storytelling and how they can leverage stories. And I said, my goodness, I can't believe this. And so I wish I could tell you that I mapped out an amazing game plan 3 years ago about how I was going to be the keynote speaker, but that's not how it went down. I tell you, how did it happen? I continued to work on my craft and I attracted the opportunity to myself. I attracted that other client that I worked with, who then asked me to come speak. I attracted that opportunity. I then worked with this individual, gave them great value, and then guess what? They said, hey, you need to be the person that's going to come in and speak. And I share that with you to make you understand this, that success is not something that you pursue. And that's why I love these words by Jim Rohn. It is something that you attract by the person that you become. And so my question for you is, what are you attracting into your life right now? And if you don't like some of the things that you're attracting into your life, maybe you're not happy with the opportunities you're attracting, maybe you're not happy with the people that you're attracting, maybe you're not happy with the circumstances that you attract to your life, then what I'm saying to you is, as opposed to focusing on the circumstances, opposed to focusing on the external factors, what I'm saying is you need to work on yourself so that you can show up differently and you can show up the very things that you want. And so I start off by telling you I wanted to ask you three very powerful, profound questions. And what I'm saying to you is, if you'll take the time to go back and think about these questions, to answer these questions, what I'm saying is you'll be able to make a tremendous impact and a change in your life. The very first question, of course, is what are you chasing in your life? What are you chasing right now? And is this thing that you're chasing truly going to bring you happiness and fulfillment and put you in line with your calling and the purpose in your life? The second thing is, after I said, well, what are you chasing? The second thing is, what are you holding on to? And is there something that you're maybe been holding on to for too long that you need to let go because you've held on to it for a bit too long? And this is your time to absolutely let it go. And so thirdly, the last thing is, what are you attracting into your life? And if you don't like the things that you're attracting to your life, I'm going to challenge you to start working on yourself, because we attract what we are. And if you want to have success, success is not something you pursue. It is something you attract by becoming an attractive person, not physically attractive, but because you've been putting in the work and making the things work.
Here's a common trait that I find with most people who are successful, most people who are able to create the kind of life that they want, most people who aren't really just sitting on the sidelines and making excuses and observing other people play it big in their lives. The one thing that they all have in common is that they take full ownership of their lives. They take full ownership of whatever is taking place in their life. And if you really contrast that, one of the things that I notice about people who unfortunately are not fulfilled in life, people who unfortunately are not realizing their goals and their dreams, people who unfortunately are not winning at life, but rather are losing, the one characteristic about them is they find a way to sort of pass on their ownership to somebody else. And so they blame it on the circumstances. They blame it on the economy. They blame it on something that happened to them years ago. They blame it on the fact that somebody doesn't really care about them or somebody's trying to keep them down. And so there's a clear distinction. Successful people take full ownership and responsibility for their circumstances, for the life that they're looking to create, for the good, the bad, and the ugly. And people who tend to be unsuccessful have this pattern of really trying to find a way to sort of pass things on and push them off to somebody else. And so what I'm going to challenge you to do tonight is really for you to own it. I want you to write that down. I want you to own it. And you say, well, own what, Andy? I want you to own your circumstances. I want you to own whatever's taking place in your life. So if you've got $1 million in your bank account, I want you to own that. But listen, if you are literally living paycheck to paycheck, I want you to own that as well. If you're having a very successful, happy marriage, own that entirely. And guess what? If your marriage is struggling and you're not happy and fulfilled in your marriage, I want you to own that. If you are in phenomenal shape right now, you're doing amazing, you're in the best shape of your life, I want you to own that. But guess what? If you know that you have been struggling with your health and struggling with your weight, I want you to own it. Whether it's good or whether it's bad, whether it's awesome or whether it is an absolute challenge, I want you to take ownership of it. And you might be saying, well, why is it so important that you take ownership? Well, the reason why it's so important for you to take ownership is because oftentimes we cannot really be able to create a shift and a change in our life if we don't first take ownership of it. In other words, you cannot change something that you do not own. And so the people who are constantly buying into the dialogue and really just putting out their circumstances or the excuses, what they're doing is their storyline that they're building in their mind is really putting them in this disempowered position. In other words, they're putting themselves in a position of just simply being a victim. You see, because once you start saying, well, it's because of the economy, once you start saying it's because of, this person is president or potentially could be president, or it's because this party dominates over this party, or once you start saying it's because my boss doesn't like me, it's because of what happened to me about 5 years ago, it's because of my mom, it's because of my dad, it's because of my siblings, it's because nobody really wants to help me out. You see, once you start blaming it on the circumstances and you start pointing the finger at other people, then what you've done is you've relinquished your power. In other words, you've given away your power. And so what you're saying is that you no longer have any control. You don't have control over your finances. You don't have control over your weight. You don't have control over your marriage. You don't have control over your goals and your dreams. And you're just sort of coasting through life. And your life is a representation of the circumstances, the happenstance, and the things that are happening around you. But the differentiation and the thing that really differentiates those who go through life with that type of a mindset and those who are extremely successful, those who are successful say, hey, you know what? Some things are going to happen to me in life. Some things are going to be good. Some things are going to be bad. But regardless of what takes place, I'm going to take full ownership of it. And once I take ownership of it, what it means is then I then have the power to create a shift. I create a change once I actually own it. And so I want to share with you, one of my own personal stories, and this was a difficult lesson for me to really embrace myself. And we're going to sort of go back. And so there's one particular point that I decided to co-sign on a student loan for someone. And so I was blessed and fortunate enough when I graduated from Florida State University, I basically graduated with just basically minimal student loan debt, if any student loan debt whatsoever, because I had scholarships and so forth. And I think one time I did go get like an emergency loan, but we're talking about for a very, very small amount, less than $5,000. So I was really blessed and fortunate to graduate from college with practically no student loan debt. But I decided to co-sign on a student loan for somebody with the understanding that once they completed the schooling that they were going through, that they would actually pay for their student loan. That was the understanding. And so unfortunately, when that person graduated and that person now had the means to be able to start making payments on their student loan, they started off making the payments on the student loan, and then they decided to no longer make payments on that student loan. Now, of course, you can imagine that puts me in a very special type of a predicament, because I co-signed on the student loan with the understanding that this person was going to pay the portion of the student loan that they were responsible for, thinking that, that I could trust this person was going to move forward and do what they said that they were going to do. And unfortunately, that person did not honor their commitment. And so now I find myself in a situation that I have one or two options, that either I choose not to pay the student loan and significantly impair and impact my credit, or I make payments on a student loan that was for somebody else's funding. And so needless to say, I was caught between what is called a rock and a hard place, if you ever heard that expression before. And so very begrudgingly, I was making these student loan payments. And so every single month that I was making these student loan payments, you can only imagine, and I'm going to tell you right now, that when it was time for me to make those student loan payments, the day that I had to make those payments, I remember I would literally start thinking about it throughout the day. And I'd start replaying the whole scenario. And I would replay the fact that this person told me that they were going to do something, and now they were no longer honoring their commitment. I would replay the fact that this person now had the means to make this payment, and this person was just choosing not to make the payments. And so now this made me very upset and very bitter towards this person. I'm thinking, like, how could this person do that? How could your word mean absolutely nothing? How could you just leave somebody else to pay your student loan? Like, what kind of a person does that? And so every single time I would be thinking about that, literally, I could feel myself getting really, really upset and frustrated. And I remember just sometimes sitting behind the computer and just pressing the buttons really hard and being really frustrated. And sometimes every single time that I'd have to make that payment, I would literally get so frustrated, so upset, that I would call that person up and leave a voicemail on their phone and remind them how they said they were going to do something and they're not doing it, and I just had to make a payment. And so month after month after month, I was repeating this cycle of being very frustrated and being very, very upset. And every time I shared this story with somebody, I presented myself in this situation as the victim, because I was only trying to help somebody and they didn't honor their commitment. And now here I am stuck with this student loan that I'm having to make payments on. And we're talking about a student loan that was for literally tens of thousands of dollars. We're talking about a student loan that was in excess of $40,000. So we're not just talking about a little $3,000 student loan. And so now you can only imagine that this was a repetitive cycle. And so what I need you to understand is this. In that particular situation, I was blaming the person for the circumstances. I was blaming the fact that they didn't honor their commitment. I was blaming the fact that they didn't follow through what they said they were going to do. And as long as I continued to blame the other person, there was really not very much that I was able to do to be able to handle and deal with this situation. And most importantly, get this situation to really go away. And then so finally, I had what I called a breakthrough moment. And so what I did was I just sort of got still for a moment and I started to reflect on the situation. And instead of painting myself as a victim, I decided to own it. What I'm asking you to learn to do in your circumstances, I decided to own the situation. And so I decided to start creating a different storyline. And so the first part that I understand of the storyline is, guess what? This person did not hold a gun to my head for me to go ahead and co-sign on the student loan. They requested I co-sign on the student loan, and I thought about it and I decided to do it. The other thing is, guess what? When you decide that you're going to co-sign on something, and I had to tell this to myself, what you are basically saying is, in the event that this person who's responsible for the debt does not fulfill their obligation on the debt, and the creditor has probably already determined that, which is why the creditor requested that this person get a co-signer. And so in the event that this person does not honor their debt, when you're the co-signer, you're basically raising your hand and you're saying, hey, you know what? If this person doesn't pay their debt that you've already established is likely not to pay their debt, then I'm going to step in and pay their debt. And so that is literally exactly what I signed up for. And so what I decided to do was stop focusing on what the person did and realize that I made a very poor decision in deciding to co-sign on this student loan for this person. It was a poor decision on my behalf. And what I realized is that I could continue to be the victim in that situation, or I could take full ownership of the situation. And once I took full ownership of the situation, what I need you to understand is sometimes when you take full ownership of a situation, the situation does not necessarily change. And so once I decided to take ownership of the situation, guess what? The student loan didn't go anywhere. When you decide to take ownership of your life, the fact that maybe perhaps your marriage is struggling, that doesn't necessarily just disappear. The fact that maybe you're struggling with your weight, that doesn't necessarily disappear. The fact that maybe you are trying to get yourself to the next level in your business or you're unfulfilled at the moment, that doesn't necessarily disappear. But what happens is when you take ownership, all of a sudden now you put yourself in position to be able to make something happen. Because now you're saying, wait a second, I own this. And now that I own this, I can do something to change it. And so now that I own the situation and I was no longer the victim and pointing the finger and blaming somebody else. As a matter of fact, they said, when you point the finger at somebody else, you have three fingers that are pointing back at you. And so we've got to be willing to take some level of ownership. So I came to a realization, you know what? Listen, I've got to take ownership of the situation. And so unfortunately, I didn't want to be in this situation, but I played a role in putting myself in this situation. So then I decided to go ahead and create a game plan to really aggressively begin to pay off this student loan. And so instead of just making the minimum payments like I typically did when I was the victim, oh, poor me, I've got to make these payments every single month, I decided, you know what, this is now my debt. I co-signed on the student loan. And if I want to get from underneath this debt, then I'm going to have to do some things to help me to get from underneath the debt. So I started making bigger payments, larger payments. And then there are times that I would make larger payments. Sometimes instead of paying the standard payment of a couple $100, I throw $1,000 at it. And then another time I throw $3,000 at it. And then another time I throw $10,000 at the loan. And then another time I threw $3,000 at the loan. And so over time, because now that I took full ownership of it and I changed my perspective, you see, I couldn't make large payments towards that debt before because of the fact that mentally I felt as if it wasn't mine. And so every time I wanted to write a big check, every time I wanted to make a large payment, I was like, I'm not writing a big payment. That's not even my loan. That's that person's loan. How am I going to have to make the payments? But once I took ownership of it, I said, wait a second, this is your loan. It's on your credit. You co-signed. Now I was able to make bigger payments. But here's what happened. Something amazing happened. Number one, my level of stress began to change. My perspective changed. I no longer now had a level of bitterness and anger every time I made payments, but now I was actually happy to make payments because every time I made a payment, it meant that I was getting one step closer to the outcome that I ultimately wanted to create. And over time, over a period of time, guess what? I was able to completely pay off the loan. And now the balance is at $0. So the loan has been completely paid off. And you say, well, Andy, how did you go from really prolonging this situation to paying off the loan in a relatively short amount of time? The major shift that took place is I took ownership. And so now I want you to think about your life right now, some place that you want to create a shift, some place that you want to create a change. I don't know where that is for you. Maybe perhaps it's with your finances. Maybe it's with your relationship. Maybe it's with your health. Maybe it's within your business. And what I'm saying to you is examine that area in your life and think about, is there a place in which you have been sort of passing on your responsibility and sort of blaming it on somebody else, blaming it on your team member, blaming it on your spouse, blaming it on your genetics, blaming it on your parents, blaming it on something else rather than taking full ownership of it. And if you have found yourself doing that, I want to challenge you right now to change your perspective. The late Wayne Dyer said this. He says, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And so what happens sometimes, the circumstances doesn't change, but your perspective change. And once your perspective changes, guess what happens? Now all of a sudden, you begin to have a different approach. You begin to have a different outlook. And now you can tackle the situation entirely different and ultimately produce the type of results that you really, truly want. And so I'm asking you right now to look at your life and look at the different areas in your life that you want to create a shift and a change. And I want you to pinpoint those areas in your life in which you've been pushing off responsibility and blaming it on somebody else. And I want you to take full ownership. Why? Because you cannot change something that you do not own. And it won't be until you decide to take full ownership of your situation, full ownership of your circumstances, full ownership of your relationship, full ownership of your health, of your finances, of your goals and your dreams, will you be able to finally make something happen. And so it is perhaps one of the most simplistic, but also difficult things that we have to do. But when you're able to create that shift, I'm telling you, there's a tremendous amount of growth that begins to take place. When you're able to make that shift, all of a sudden now you go from being this victim to becoming this victor. All of a sudden now you go from sitting on the sidelines to now you're in the game and you're able to get out there and make things happen. And so I want you right now to start being very intentional about really taking full ownership of what is happening in your life. You know, I had a wedding that I attended this past weekend, and I have one of my very good friends who was at the wedding. And so I was checking in on her because she's in the process right now, this moment, of about to launching her new book. And we were having a discussion, and I said, well, how are things going with the book? And she gave me this dreadful face, like, I was like, what happened? She's like, you're not going to believe this. I'm like, what? What happened? She's like, you are not going to believe this. I was like, what happened? She is like, listen, my computer completely crashed and I lost my entire manuscript for my book. And so I looked at her and I'm like, you're kidding, right? You have a backup someplace, right? Like a partial backup on another computer, on a jump drive. You emailed somebody the manuscript. And so you definitely have a backup, right? She goes, no, I've got no backup. I've got to start all over again. And so I am just feeling like, I'm just blown away because I know the amount of work that I had to do to be able to actually get my book completed and published, Show Up for Your Life, 7 Principles to Living an Extraordinary Life. And I know that especially towards the end, that moment sometimes feels the hardest to be able to cross the finish line. And I could only imagine if I would have lost my entire manuscript and had to start all over again. And now here my friend was telling me that literally she lost her entire manuscript and she had to start all over again. And so I am waiting at that moment, and I really wouldn't be able to blame her if she was saying, oh, poor me, like, I can't believe this, and maybe it wasn't worth it for me to write this book, I'm just going to postpone it for another 6 months, I'm just going to go ahead and release it next year. I mean, she really, really could have continued to beat herself up and so forth. And so what was the most crazy and most amazing thing was, we gave her a ride from the actual wedding, and we decided to make a pit stop over at our condo. And when we stopped at our condo, the first thing she did was she reached out, she grabbed her laptop, and she popped her laptop open. And I said, well, what are you doing? You about to check some email? Do you need the Wi-Fi code? She says, no, I don't need the Wi-Fi code. I said, well, what are you doing right now? She says, I'm writing my book. And she's like, I just got to sit here and I just got to rewrite the book. I just got to hope that things are going to start coming back to me. And I was just blown away at her recovery time. When the average person would have still been moping, the average person would have still been playing the victim, the average person would have been telling the story over and over again, she took full ownership of the situation. She took full ownership of the fact that she had a manuscript, that the manuscript crashed, that she should have had a backup in various locations. She did not have it properly backed up. And so she took full ownership of it. And now that she took ownership of it, she says, hey, listen, the only logical thing is I just need to start writing again so I could get this book done. And if somebody from the outside would say, oh my goodness, that is absolutely insane. How does somebody recover so fast? And I'm going to tell you how you recover so fast. You only recover fast like that when you decide to stop putting the blame elsewhere and stop blaming the circumstances and somebody else, and you decide to take full ownership of the situation and say, wait a second here, something is taking place. I'm not happy about this situation, but I've got to take full ownership of this situation and I've got to turn this thing around. I've got to make this thing happen. I've got to find a way to sort of turn the corner here and make this thing happen. And it's the only way that you can process things and make it happen. And when you learn to exercise that muscle of taking full ownership of a situation, you begin to recover so much quicker from setbacks and things that happen in your life. And you begin to have a higher image of who you are. And so you don't go through life being a victim, but you go through life understanding that, you know what, some things are going to happen, but if they do, I'm going to man up, or I'm going to woman up, and I'm going to take full ownership and full responsibility, and I'm going to do whatever is in my personal power to turn the situation around. And so here's what I'm saying to you, that you only have one opportunity to do this thing called life. You can go through life either being a victim, or you can go through life being a victor. You can go through life being a winner, or you can be what many of the world would look on to be as a loser. But the main deciding factor between winners and losers, victims and victors, is one innate, definite thing, and that is that winners and people who are victors always take full ownership and responsibility of their circumstances. And so I don't know what it is that you're dealing with at this moment, in your finances, in your relationship, in your health, or whatever you're dealing with at the moment. What I'm saying to you is, I want you to take full ownership of the situation. Why? Because until you actually own it, you cannot change it. And so it's nothing more than a change in your perspective. Wayne Dyer, Dr. Wayne Dyer, the late Dr. Wayne Dyer says, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And what I want you to do is start executing change in your life and stop allowing circumstances and people around you to dictate how your life ends up or to dictate your circumstances.